The former Republican lieutenant governor under Governor Kemp. And Duncan stood up to Trump's lies that the 2020 election was stolen. Now, Jeff, you are now running as a Democrat.
So the last election result I'd like to discuss from Tuesday has to do with yet another rhino turncoat. And no, we're not talking about Thomas Massie. We're talking about a character who, perhaps to his credit, is the one true honest rhino, in the sense he didn't even try to mislead people about being the true Republican or principled conservative still standing, as many rhinos often do. Rather, he fully came out and embraced his true identity. He transitioned, you could say, over to the Democrat Party after he literally trooned out so hard at Trump over January 6th and the stolen election, all of that, saying, I can no longer support this man. This is a cult of personality. And of course, at the time, as the rhinos often do, said, we're standing for the true principled old school Republican Party. And yet in the span of a couple of years, he's now a card-carrying Democrat expressing truly often 100% Democrat leftist values, while of course claiming still to wear the skin of the alienated conservative, which, if you've listened a lot to the rhetoric of the Democrat Party, these people likewise always claim that they're trying to give open arms to, right? Where are the principled Republicans still left? Hey, John McCain, Liz Cheney, Dick Cheney, do you people want to come over and join our tent? You know, we're welcoming you. We really are the party of the disaffected neocons at the end of the day. And then, as I said every single time, these people literally just reveal their true colors. So I found it pretty hilarious, first of all, that this guy even tried to run for office as a Democrat, having been that former Republican. But the story doesn't stop there. Because if you were wondering whether the Democrat Party was actually honest about it, they're open, they want to have a big tent with the disaffected Republicans, well, how do you think that this guy by the name of Jeff Duncan actually performed in the Georgia election? Well, we have those numbers, and I can inform you now that the guy did so bad, he didn't even place. He's not even on the podium. As a matter of fact, when you're on the website, you literally have to click the expand list button to even see how this guy did. That is right, a complete washed up, irrelevant joke who thought to himself, maybe the Democrats will accept me. Maybe, you know, I can get a contributorship job on MSNBC or CNN. Oh, wait, both those networks either got bought out or effectively went under. Oh, what do I do now? Run for office as a Democrat? Boing! Did terribly. There you go. I want to talk about this here today, guys, because it is quite hilarious to laugh at on one hand. On the other hand, I think there are actually some meaningful takeaways. First and foremost, again, where the rhinoism always leads in the end, because we have seen quite a few characters come along over the past decade and try to present what they frame as truly principled alternatives to the MAGA movement, whether that is Mike Pence and his sleepy Indiana establishment Republicans claiming that, you know, we shouldn't wield power when we have it because, you know, that's not what Ronald Reagan would do or something like that. You know, it's just very like virtue signaling style of speech. But the conclusion there is always what? Republicans shouldn't play to win. And then simultaneously, on the other side, you have these people like Thomas Massie, who claim to represent the third worldist pro-Palestine libertarian side of the Republican Party, quote unquote libertarian, who in the end, likewise, just end up caucusing with Democrats, taking money from Islamic far leftists who are also donating to Ilhan Omar, caucusing and supporting alongside being endorsed by people like Jasmine Crockett. There you go. You notice how every single time all of these people who rise up and claim to be the true Scotsman or someone starting a real conservative movement superior to that of Donald Trump never actually make anything better. Rather, they just subvert and end up on the other side, that being the political left. Yeah, there seems to be a pattern, and we need to discuss that 100%. You know, the people who maybe, I don't know if it's narcissism, whatever it is, think that instead of building upon the most successful right-wing movement of the 21st century, rather try to burn it all down and build their own. And then every single time it's like, are they actually providing anything viably better than that? No, they're trying to burn down the movement because they want to work for the left. You see that every single time? let's get into it. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is the best way to support our work, and it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, it is time to introduce you to a guy by the name of Jeff Duncan, who may vaguely sound familiar if you remember the whole, January 6th and all that drama. Basically, this is the former lieutenant governor of Georgia back during the 2020 election, who you may remember very famously went super hard against Trump and was supporting the impeachments and the criminal indictments and all that, saying we ran a perfectly secure election and whatnot. Well, here he is years later after, let's not forget, I'm going to repeat this, having claimed to just be a true Republican who was trying to stand with the actual principles of the party, not just get hijacked by MAGA populism, all that nonsense he was saying, is now running for office as a Democrat. That's right. And well, let's take a listen here to CNN introduce him and interview him last night, because it'll tell you a lot. All right.
Out front to Jeff Duncan. He's running as a Democrat in the race for Georgia governor. Now, anyone watching this show will remember Duncan. He was obviously he's been on CNN many times. He was the former Republican lieutenant governor under Governor Kemp. And Duncan stood up to Trump's lies that the 2020 election was stolen. Now, Jeff, you are now running as a Democrat. So just people say, okay, look, lieutenant governor at that time, popular Republican administration, all of a sudden now a Democrat. How much does President Trump have to do with your decision to switch parties?
Everything. I'll spoil that for you.
It's certainly part of it. I mean, a sitting president trying to steal an election as a statewide elected official like I was, certainly is part of it. But I think it's the toxic, corrosive leadership style that's spread like an infection across all Republicans in all circles. It's really just been an unfortunate series of missteps by them. And I think as I travel around the state running for governor as a proud Democrat, folks are wanting to talk about issues that Donald Trump and other Republicans aren't talking about. The affordability crisis, the healthcare crisis, and yes, the Donald Trump crisis, which even Republicans agree is a crisis at this point.
So you're one of the...
Okay, wait, so let's break down that answer. First of all, he gives this vague explanation of how, well, I was a Republican, but now it's not just Donald Trump, it's the corrosive leadership style taking over the party. Well, nobody knows what that means. I would have to assume basically what he's saying is he's mad that the GOP marginally, nominally, sometimes nowadays plays to win and doesn't just hand over total power to the left. And then 2 seconds later, after, let's not forget, supposedly this guy's like a true Republican who just got driven out of the party, identifies himself as a proud Democrat, and then basically says he stands with the Democrats on major economic and social issues. So the whole point is what? It's not because Donald Trump, tried to, mess with the election or something. You're literally just a leftist, and you came out and admitted that. And very hilarious how, again, the RINO crowd of the party tried to sell you and many other people for years on this idea that, well, they're actually like true conservatives fighting for the soul of the party and MAGA shouldn't alienate them. And then what do they say? I'm running for office as a proud Democrat who agrees with left-wing economics as one example. Aren't you guys the ones who do these like Ronald Reagan Center think tanks about trickle-down economics, tax cuts, the fiscal conservatism, stuff I totally agree with, by the way. But hey, isn't that funny? Am I the one who actually believes in that stuff? Am I the one who says, yeah, I don't agree with the Democrat platform on basically anything because they're like wrong about everything? But you guys say I'm the fake right-winger, right? Because I support Trump. That's not what Ronald Reagan would do vaguely or something. Let me ask you then the question, would Ronald Reagan support Zoran Mamdani's economic agenda? Really? Give me a freaking break. But all right, there you have this clown. All right. And we're not finished because this interview gets even funnier. So already I'm going to spoil it, I guess, right now. You can see the election results. Okay. So this guy, after, you would think maybe that's a big dramatic story in a sense. Hey, former lieutenant governor of Georgia, second most powerful guy in the state, former Republican, now running as a Democrat. Well, how did he do? First of all, the far left insane mayor, Keisha Lance Bottoms, who allowed Atlanta to burn back in 2020, she's taking the Democrat nomination with 56% in first place, a distant first, maybe not that surprising. But you go down the list, you notice this Jeff Duncan character literally came in fourth place with just 7% of the vote. That's how he did. He sold his entire soul. He transitioned. Rumor has it he's been prescribed HRT ever since January 6th, 2021. And all he got for it in return was 7% in this lousy t-shirt. Quite hilarious. Was it worth it, buddy? Well, let's hear his answer on that, okay? As he's going to, by the way, even sit here on camera and pretend to be a serious candidate as he's getting 7%. Well, let's hear about how Donald Trump strengthened his run as a Democrat or something.
The main Democratic candidates for governor in Georgia. Obviously, it's a very crowded field. We've just got early numbers coming in. Obviously, Keisha Lance Bottoms is way ahead on these early numbers, 66%. You're on the board there. Trump has called you out as a failed former lieutenant governor. He's called you a total lightweight. He's called you a total loser, all of which is obviously consistent with words he uses to describe opponents or people who've challenged him. Has that helped you out at all in this race?
Yeah, everywhere I go, I get, pats on the...
Well, clearly it has not, because you're at 7%. What kind of question even is it? Has that helped you out in the race? Oh, look at the results. Do you think it helped him? No, because at the end of the day, he represents basically a Republican disaffected voter base that really doesn't exist in reality. And on the flip side, Democrats, as we know, are insane, violent communists, and they may give this lip service to the idea that, oh, we want to platform the disaffected Republicans. Hey, come home, come to our tent. We're the last party of sanity. But hopefully now you can understand that's all just a ruse, right? Basically, they use you as the useful idiots that you are to advance their violent, insane communism. They don't want you. They don't welcome you. And if the election results, hopefully, are nothing else, they're proof of that to you characters. But he's probably not going to learn. He's going to go work for the Lincoln Project in about 2 seconds. By the way, on the front of the Lincoln Project, anyone remember that type of stuff, right? Republicans against Trump, Lincoln Project. What happened to all of that? And notice how, first of all, that never went anywhere. And then secondly, in the end, literally, as I said, what has just ended up being a total advancement of the Democrat Party and left-wing politics. But these people all frame themselves as, we're the disaffected Republicans. Notice how nothing they say ever actually aligns with Republicans or conservatives at all, unless it's some vague out-of-context speech they clip from Ronald Reagan and say, look, well, this means he would be a Democrat today, right? But as I said, the whole thing is an op. And there's a common denominator with a lot of people who try to do the same thing. Understand? Right? We've seen this act time and time again. And let's just finish out and hear what he has to say.
Back, thanks for your courage to stand up to Donald Trump. And the reality is almost everybody that I meet would have done exactly the same thing. Most people don't wake up wanting to tell bold-faced lies about an election or try to steal an election or be willing to embrace conspiracy theories that make no sense. And so that's certainly been part of the story. But I think it's also about, we all need to have more political courage in this tough moment. I mean, Donald Trump is the worst decision this country's ever made, and even Republicans are figuring that out firsthand. And so we've got to have honest umpires that show up and be able to call balls and strikes, right? In Georgia, expanding Medicaid is a must. Republicans have lost the narrative. I was on the other side of this argument for a number of years, and I was wrong. The same with...
You transitioned. As I said, you took the HRT. See, that's what's hilarious, okay? Because... as I said, he really is proving the point that all of these people who say they're walking away from MAGA for this reason or that reason, it's really principled, I'm the true conservative. Oh, prime example. This is the case study. They always end up in the hands of Democrats, right? As a case I can bring you here. Let's talk about the way Jeff Duncan talked about ICE on the campaign trail. Take a listen, in fact, for yourself. So this is the guy supposedly who, was the real Republican all along and all this stuff. And then here he is saying that local police should not cooperate with ICE to arrest criminal illegal aliens, which is, of course, famously just a truly principled Republican position and not just radical far left communism, which is what the guy really has been all along.
Look, it's inappropriate for us to use state resources to reinforce these fake ICE raids that are all about fear and intimidation. I think one of the most disgusting sights I've seen in this whole play out in Georgia was state resources being utilized to reinforce ICE efforts around the Hyundai raid.
Hello, my fellow true conservatives. Please come and join me as we embrace open borders, mass crime in our cities, and full-blown violent communism. But this is the principled GOP, by the way, many such cases. And let's not forget, supposedly, this all is just about January 6th, right? Because that's what a lot of these people said at the time. Mike Pence is one example. I was a supporter of the president, but the fact that he couldn't accept an election result or said it was stolen or the conspiracy theories, that's not something we can stand for. And yet the HRT, the transitioning, it starts to set in, and then all of a sudden you're like, the ICE raids are inhumane. I'm a Democrat. I believe we should be expanding the welfare state just like Ronald Reagan famously wanted to do, and give more Medicaid to illegal aliens and raise taxes on the rich and all this stuff. It's like, very funny how that works. And I'll say, as I did in the beginning, that this is a very common denominator with people in some way or another who have come along and tried to replace MAGA in one form or another over the past decade. And why is that? Because I think it's just simply the reality, as I said, that what we're looking at currently with Trump's movement, is it perfect? No. Are there ways in which we could build on it, expand upon it, improve upon it? Sure, right? That's a fair discussion to be had. But fundamentally, like it or not, accept it or not, it is by far the most effective right-wing political movement of the 21st century, and maybe even before that. And in many ways, you could argue it's the best and only chance we have, right? Is that we have to take what we have now, keep the momentum going, move the ball down the field, because I don't know if all you people, you so-called principled people, have noticed, but there is actually no better alternative, right? You can come along and say, oh, if I was in, which is a very narcissistic stance too, right? If I was in charge, even though I'm not, here's why I would do a better job for X, Y, and Z. But, it's just the reality. Every time these people try to do it, you see what happens, okay? Look at this character right here. Prime example. They don't actually know what they're doing. They're not actually better, but that's a common thread, is that, well, yeah, because MAGA is the most effective right-wing movement, as I said, of this 21st century, then fundamentally anyone who's coming along and trying to basically tear it down and build something new, not only likely is not going to build something as good, but really in many cases, it's just serving the left in one way or another, okay? Mike Pence and Thomas Massie have very opposite politics. I understand that. I can comprehend the nuances of political ideology, so don't try to come at me with this lecture. But you understand how in the end, the function of it actually is the same, okay? You can claim it's because of this ideology or that ideology, my principles versus these other principles. Okay, fine. But the function, you understand, of what you're doing, subverting the most effective thing conservatives have, ultimately is acting as an asset for the left. And what I actually appreciate about this guy is he's by tuning out in the way that he did, okay, is actually demonstrating on full scale, maybe on steroids, what that actually looks like, right? How much it is the case that the people who, whether they're coming from the center or the supposed right wing to the right of Trump, whatever it is, at the end of the day, if you're subverting MAGA, you're serving the left. If you're trying to tear it down and say you're going to build something new, the post-Trump GOP, whatever, without, what everything Trump built, yeah, you're not actually doing a good thing. You're basically just working as a leftist, and it's probably been the case the entire time. That's why all these various different characters from various different ideological angles have come at Trump. They've all failed, but the common theme is what? Every single time they end up on the left in some way, shape, or form. Either they're taking contributorships over at left-wing networks, they're endorsing Democrats, they're being endorsed by Democrats, or in the case of Jeff Duncan, I guess Jessica Duncan now, right? Just straight up are now running for office and trying to become Democrat politicians, because that's what this thing has always been about. So let that be a prime example of everything we've been talking about. Anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts. Hope you enjoyed just a quick little fun video I wanted to do to tie all of this conversation we've been having over the past several weeks all together to say, this is the end stage, right? Finally, on rhinoism, when you're done with your troon out, freak out, and then it comes all center, you finally embrace who you really are, right? You're trapped in the wrong body. You really have been a Democrat this entire time, and there you go. There you go. We celebrate your transition, I suppose, right? So glad you're not lying to yourself anymore, right? So glad you're no longer trapped in the wrong body. Yeah, be happy who you are, Jessica Duncan. But anyways, that said, guys, let me know your thoughts. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new, and until next time, God bless and peace. Last thing I'll say. Notice too how the Liz Cheneys of the world basically argued that, well, after Trump is gone, we're going to go back to being real principled Republicans. We just need to vote for Biden or vote for Democrats this one time, get rid of toxic MAGA populism from the party, and then we'll just go back to the 2004 or 1990 style GOP and everything will be good and the true Republicans will come back. And yet, to complete the full horseshoe, they're just saying now, actually, no, we're just like far left Democrats, actually. That was an act the entire time. We were lying the entire time. It was never a temporary thing. We're switching over to the Democrat Party just out of an anti-Trump principle. No, you're just leftists, right? You're just leftists. I love this guy so much. He's so useful to explain what I am saying, right? So just perfect illustration. Could not do it better. All right. That said, guys, let me know your thoughts. See you guys later. Peace.